I was in my second year studying biochemistry when I first had Professor Lehmann for molecular structures. He was the kind of man you'd assume had tenure from the moment he was born. Gray suit every day, tie always slightly off-center, skin that looked washed out under the fluorescent lights. He barely spoke above a murmur and had a habit of pausing mid-sentence to stare through students, as if trying to remember where he was. The class was held in a large lecture hall, but despite the number of students, he somehow seemed to notice everything. If someone left early, he'd mark it. If you skipped a reading, he'd bring it up. Not confrontationally, just in passing, as though he were tallying your involvement for something not yet announced. Midway through the semester, he began offering what he called supplemental reviews in his private research lab. He told us it was voluntary, meant for students who wanted to engage with material beyond the curriculum. The first few sessions filled up quickly. Curious students, mostly honors track, signed up out of ambition. I wasn't among them. 2 weeks later, I received an email from him directly. He'd selected a few students for invitation-only review sessions, and I was on the list. The email was short and neutral in tone, but the implication was clear. It wasn't optional. The location was unusual. Lab 6B wasn't in the main science building, but down in the South Annex, an older structure that barely got used anymore. I'd been in that wing once during orientation. Most of it had been stripped bare or converted into storage space. I had to use a side entrance to get in. The hallway lights flickered inconsistently. Half the signage was outdated or missing altogether. Lab 6B was near the end of the corridor. The door was solid, painted in a chipped shade of off-white. A keypad had been installed above the handle. Lehmann arrived 2 minutes after I did, typed in a code without speaking, and motioned for me to enter ahead of him. The lab looked unused at first glance. Long tables with scattered lab glassware, a metal sink stained by rust. On the far end, a wide metal cabinet stood against the wall, locked with a sliding latch. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering faintly. The windows had been boarded up from the inside with thick particle board. I didn't ask why. He gestured toward a table in the center and pulled a stool out for me. I sat, and he took a seat across from me, placing a single binder between us. For the next 40 minutes, he reviewed a series of molecular models that weren't part of the syllabus. The content was real, obscure, but accurate. His tone remained calm and neutral, almost rehearsed. He occasionally looked toward the door, then the cabinet, before returning to his notes. He didn't ask me anything until the very end. Then he closed the binder and tilted his head slightly. "How often do you come to campus on weekends?" The question caught me off guard. I shrugged and said something vague about the library. He nodded slowly. "It's quieter here on Saturdays. Fewer distractions. I find students focus better." I didn't respond. A few seconds passed before he stood up, retrieved a clipboard from a side table, and handed it to me. My name was already filled in at the top, and the form listed me as part of an independent academic enrichment cohort. I hesitated. He remained silent. I signed. I attended 3 more sessions over the next month. Each time, the lab was empty apart from him. Each time, the content shifted slightly further from standard material. During the second session, he introduced a new project. A theoretical molecule he claimed had unusual properties. He showed me diagrams, some handwritten, others printed with old university letterhead. He never gave me copies. There was no formal research group that I could find linked to his name. When I searched the university site, his profile was sparse. No publications listed, no grant activity, nothing recent. By the fourth session, I noticed the lab door had been retrofitted. The lock was new, but the outer frame had been reinforced too, like a deadbolt had been removed and replaced. Inside, he'd rearranged the layout. The tables had been pushed closer together, and the cabinet now had a digital padlock. One of the stools had been removed. I mentioned this casually. He didn't acknowledge it. That day, instead of a review, he asked me to help him move some sensitive materials from the campus server. He handed me a flash drive and gave me instructions to access a restricted terminal in the library archives. When I tried, the terminal blocked me with a credentials error. I brought the flash drive back and told him it didn't work. He took it from me without comment and ended the session early. The next morning, someone from the IT department emailed the class, warning about unauthorized access attempts on restricted faculty accounts. Nothing was linked to me directly, but the timestamp matched the session I'd tried to access. I didn't go back the next week. I received a reminder email from him 2 days later, then another, shorter, signed only with his initials. On Thursday evening, he called my phone, which I hadn't given him. His voice was the same as in class, low, deliberate, emotionless. He asked if I'd forgotten the time slot. I said I had a conflict. He didn't answer, just ended the call. I avoided him for the next week, skipped his lectures, stopped answering emails. On campus, I started changing my routines. New study spots, different routes between buildings. I wasn't sure what I was protecting myself from. I just didn't want to be near that lab again. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation in the student cafe. 2 second-year students in chemistry were talking about Lehmann. One of them mentioned getting a private invite to review molecular prediction models. The session was scheduled for Saturday in Lab 6B. I waited until they left, then followed one of them. Not to confront, just to see. He walked to the campus center, met up with a friend, and talked casually about the review session like it was nothing unusual. That night, I went back to the South Annex. I brought a flashlight and wore plain clothes with no logos. The entrance door hadn't been locked. The hallway was quiet, empty. I stood outside Lab 6B and listened. Nothing. Not even the hum of equipment. I walked to the adjacent janitor's closet. Inside, tucked behind a mop sink, was a breaker box. It wasn't locked. I flipped the circuit labeled 6B and stepped back into the hallway. A few seconds later, the sound of the lab's ventilation system cut off. From behind the lab door, I heard movement. Heavy, deliberate, like something being dragged. I left. The following week, I filed an anonymous report with Campus Safety, describing the lab location, the locked cabinets, and the weekend sessions. I left out my name. I never received a response. A week later, the South Annex was blocked off for renovation. Lab 6B no longer appeared on the internal building directory. Lehmann still teaches. Same schedule, same tie, same pause between sentences. He no longer sends out invitation emails. My dorm was a part of a university-owned building just off campus, tucked behind the Student Services Center. It overlooked a faculty parking lot that emptied out after work hours. My window faced that lot directly, 4 floors up, with a clear view of the row of visitor spaces closest to the road. It started with a black sedan. I noticed it during a late Monday study session, parked under the second streetlight from the left, engine off, headlights dark. At first I assumed it belonged to a staff member working late, but it was still there at 2 a.m. The next night, Same car, same spot, no lights, no one visible inside. I looked for it the following week out of curiosity. Most nights it was back again. It never parked elsewhere. Always in the same stall. By the third week I began checking more deliberately. I kept a log, arrival times, duration, plate number. The rear windows were darkly tinted. No visible movement inside. One Thursday night I turned off my desk lamp and leaned against the window. There was someone in the driver's seat. His head was tilted slightly to the side, resting against the frame. He wasn't moving. The side mirror reflected the faint orange of the nearest light pole. I watched for 10 minutes. No phone glow. No signs of activity. I mentioned it to 2 other girls on my floor. Neither had noticed. One thought it might be a professor working odd hours. The other said she didn't pay attention to the lot. That weekend, I stopped turning on my overhead light at night. I used my laptop for glow, sitting back in my chair, occasionally glancing down toward the car. One night, close to 2 a.m., the headlights blinked once. Not on, just a quick flash. I backed away from the window slowly. It stayed parked for another hour. The next day, I took a long route to class that passed behind the lot. From there, I noted the plate, out of state. The frame had a local mechanic's name on it. I took a discreet photo. That night, I searched the registration online using a third-party lookup. It took a while, but I found a name, Douglas M., address listed in a nearby suburb. No university student record, no active employee listing, but in an older archived page from HR, there was a match. Douglas M., facilities maintenance, night staff, terminated 2 years ago. Noted reason, conduct violation. I called the campus security line and gave them the plate number, the parking pattern, and the fact that this person was no longer affiliated with the university. They said it wasn't parked illegally, not their jurisdiction. That night the car was back. This time earlier, around 7:45 p.m. It stayed until sunrise. The next morning I walked into the housing office and asked directly whether Douglas M. had ever worked in my building. The woman behind the counter checked something on her screen and nodded. He'd worked night cleaning shifts the year before I moved in. I didn't say anything else. I left and started keeping my blinds shut. 3 nights passed without the car. Then it returned. Not in the same spot, but farther down, tucked into a darker corner with no overhead light. Still visible if I leaned close to the glass, but not easily. That week, I noticed it arriving more often. Sometimes back-to-back nights, sometimes skipping a day or two, but always returning. Always the same car, same plate, never anyone else inside. I gathered everything, photos, logs, plate information, timestamps, and walked to the campus police building. I laid it all out for them. They were quieter this time. One officer asked when I first noticed it. Another took down my room number. That evening, the car didn't appear. The next morning, the same officer called to say it had been towed overnight. They'd found the man living in the vehicle. He had an active restraining order on file related to a student from another university. They didn't go into more detail. Housing moved me into another dorm the same week. My new room faces a courtyard. I haven't seen the car since. I moved into room 306 mid-year. Single unit, top floor, corner spot in an old dorm. It was quiet. Mostly international grad students, no one social. I had 2 night classes and a part-time job, so I was rarely back before 11. The room was plain. Twin bed, metal desk, radiator that hissed occasionally. The mattress dipped slightly in the center. First week, I didn't notice anything unusual. Then, one night, I returned after class and saw the blanket pulled back unevenly. I assumed I'd left it like that. 2 days later, same thing. This time the pillow had flipped. I always kept the tag facing down. I hadn't touched it since morning. I remade the bed and left it untouched all day. When I came back, it was shifted again. I started taking photos before leaving. By comparing them, I confirmed things were changing, small details, a blanket fold, the angle of the top sheet. There were no signs of forced entry. The door used a keycard, and I never lost mine. The window was locked, and I was on the 3rd floor, facing a dead-end alley. I lined a few index cards across the mattress, pencil marks facing up. That night, I returned to find 3 cards displaced. One had a partial heel mark. I didn't keep them. Maintenance swapped my lock the next morning. I didn't explain why. That night, the blanket had moved again. I placed the desk chair under the door handle, wedged tightly, and balanced a half-full cup of water on it. The idea was simple. If the door moved, the chair would shift. The cup would fall. It didn't. But the room smelled different in the morning. Not dirty. Just unfamiliar. I didn't sleep. Next day, I checked out a motion-sensitive webcam from the AV lab. I positioned it in the wardrobe, angled at the bed, set to record on movement. That night, the room looked untouched. The camera had one clip, black and white, 47 seconds. At 8:47 p.m., the bed moved. A figure emerged from beneath the covers. Male wearing a hoodie with the hood up. He sat up, faced away from the lens, and walked to the door and looked through the peephole for 20 seconds. He didn't open it. Then he returned to the bed, lay back down, and didn't move. I watched it 3 times. I reported it to campus security the next morning. I didn't show them the footage, just said I believed someone had accessed my room. 2 officers came to check. Nothing missing. No damage. They said they'd look into the keycard logs. They didn't contact me again. Later that week, I accessed the dorm's hallway surveillance from a shared server. At the time of the clip, no one entered or exited. No one was near my door. No activity in the hallway at all, except me, leaving for class. I moved the mattress and disassembled the bed frame. Beneath it was a solid platform bolted to the floor. No crawl space. But behind the radiator, I found a painted-over panel. Small, square, fitted into the wall. It took me half an hour to pry it loose. Behind it was a cavity, narrow, running the length of the wall. A few old pipes. Room for someone thin to slide in. It looked like it connected to the next unit. I took photos, put the panel back. That night, I didn't sleep there. I stopped sleeping there at all. I started crashing on friends' couches, staying late at the library, volunteering for early shifts. 3 weeks later, housing offered to move me to a different dorm. No explanation needed. I accepted. Room 306 was reassigned 2 days later. I kept the USB. The clip still plays. The figure still crawls out, pauses, and walks to the door. Right before he turns back to the bed, he faces the camera and smiles.